We've all seen it on cop shows. An eyewitness to a crime is brought to a police station, shown a lineup of suspects or a batch of photographs, and asked to pick out the perpetrator. Easy to do, right? After all, the eyewitness saw the crime with his or her own eyes. As it turns out, not so easy. Over the past 30 years, psychologists and criminologists have been studying how eyewitness identifications can go horribly wrong. The Innocence Project, a national organization that works to free people who've been wrongly convicted, has found that eyewitnesses mistakenly identified suspects in 70% of convictions that were later overturned by DNA evidence. In fact, eyewitnesses can be so problematic that experts have come up with a new term for it: eyewitness misidentification. I first learned about eyewitness misidentification in a criminal justice class I took last year. That class opened my eyes to the many problems that plague our justice system, and eyewitness misidentification is just one of them. But it's a huge one, and it's responsible for wrongfully incarcerating tens and thousands of people, according to the Innocence Project. After conducting extensive research for this speech, I've learned that eyewitness misidentification is a problem that we can fix, or at least minimize, through a few basic policy changes. Today, I want to persuade you that police departments across the country need to enact strong eyewitness identification guidelines. Doing so is essential to keeping innocent people out of prison and guilty people off the street. Let's start by looking more closely at the problem of eyewitness misidentification. The problem of eyewitness misidentification is rooted in human psychology. Imagine that you're an eyewitness to a violent crime. Because it's violent, the situation is tense and you're naturally scared. Even if you get a good look at the suspect, your brain and body are on edge. Then, the police bring you to the station for a lineup. Can you accurately pinpoint the perpetrator? According to my audience analysis survey, more than 80% of you think you could. Yet researchers have identified 3 factors that consistently undermine the reliability of eyewitness testimony. First, when viewing a traumatic event like a violent crime, our perceptions often don't line up with reality. Dr. Thomas Albright of the Salk Institute for Biological Studies explains that with unexpected events like crimes, our eyes work quickly to take in what we see. But we can't keep up, so our brains fill in details that simply might be wrong. Second, in addition to the perception, there are problems associated with memory. Most people think our memory simply records events, but that's not true. Writing for the Association for Psychological Science, Professor Stephen Chu explains that stress and terror can actually inhibit memory formation, and memories continue to be constructed after the originating event on the basis of information learned afterward. This means a lineup that occurs long after a crime is committed is much less reliable than one shortly after the crime. Worse still, as police and attorneys ask more and more questions, our memories can actually change over time, leading to faulty identifications. Third, there's a problem of what legal scholar Brian Ryan of Washington University Law School calls own race bias and cross-race effect. Simply put, it's easier to recognize distinguishing characteristics of someone of your own race than someone of a different race. A white person trying to pick out a person of color from a lineup, or vice versa, is prone to much greater bias and error than someone trying to pick out a person of his or her own race. Time and time again, these problems of perception, memory, and own race bias lead to the wrong person being put behind bars. The wrong person, like James Watson, who spent 38 years in a Massachusetts prison for murder. As the University of Michigan National Registry of Exonerations explains, his conviction stemmed from a mistaken cross-race identification that emerged long after the crime and only after extensive police prodding. Watson was finally set free in 2020 after DNA exonerated him. We can't allow tens and thousands of people like James Watson to waste another day behind bars. That's why police departments across the country need to adopt strong eyewitness identification guidelines. Here are 4 key guidelines I propose that are based on scientific research and are supported by psychologists, criminologists, and the Innocence Project. 1. All police lineups should be double-blind. This means that neither the person administrating the lineup or the eyewitness should know ahead of time who the primary suspect is. We don't want the lineup administrator to give off any clues that could bias the eyewitness. 2. The lineup administrator needs to provide careful instructions. The eyewitness needs to be told not to feel pressure to make a choice, and that the suspect may not actually be in the lineup. This will free the eyewitness to make a choice or not on their terms. 3. The lineup needs to be carefully composed so as to not bias the eyewitness. The people in the lineup, often known as fillers, should resemble the suspect as much as possible. For instance, instead of having a lineup where only the suspect has facial hair, everyone in the lineup should have facial hair. And 4, immediately after making an identification, the eyewitness should provide a confident statement. This statement identifies how confident the eyewitness is about the person he or she identified, 40% confident, 80%, 100%, whatever the figure is. This should happen immediately after the lineup, and it should be available to prosecutors and defense attorneys when the case goes to trial. These 4 guidelines are so important, they've been endorsed by the National Academy of Sciences and the U.S. Department of Justice. States, however, have been slow to implement them. According to Laura Smollers, professor of psychology at Arizona State University, 24 states have adopted at least one of the guidelines. But, as Professor Smollers says, we need all the states to adopt all the guidelines if we're to prevent additional miscarriages of justice. In conclusion, I hope you see how serious the problem of eyewitness misidentification is and how it can be brought under control. Doing so will not eliminate all the problems in our justice system, but it will make the system more just for thousands of people. Thank you.